Welcome to Mocktails and Masterpieces with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra, sponsored by Anthony Shefferly and Associates.
My name is Jennifer Higdon. I am a composer and I write lots and lots of music, tons of it actually. And so I'm the composer of the Cold Mountain Suite.
Wonderful. So we are so excited about this particular piece and how it fits into our commitment to new music here at the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. So I know that the suite is taking themes from your opera. So love to hear about the opera itself and kind of what inspired you to want to make an orchestral suite of that, how they work together and those sorts of things.
I had originally picked Charles Fraser's novel, Cold Mountain, for my first opera after a couple of years looking for a story. That book is amazing. When I first started to read it, I knew within the first 5 pages that this was the story. But I think for me, looking back on it, I realized that having grown up in East Tennessee, the Cold Mountain's actually not that far from the farm I lived on. And I recognized the landscape and the language and the story. But opera is about drama. First and foremost, it's about love and death. Those are the 2 big themes I think you find in opera. And Charles Fraser's novel has loads of that in it, and an interesting cast of characters, and the characters in the opera kind of develop a personality. You can see them kind of going through the story with their storylines unfolding and them changing because the Civil War is going on and they're having to deal with some pretty hard stuff. So I thought it was a really rich story to pick for an opera. The opera was hugely popular. It sold out in Santa Fe. They had to add an extra performance, and that sold out like within a day, which was kind of unheard of. It sold out in Philadelphia. It sold out in North Carolina. It's done really well. It won the International Opera Award, and it also got 2 Grammy nominations. That's a lot for a first opera. So many people liked it that they started asking me, is there some sort of orchestral suite? So when I had a chance to do an orchestral suite, because it was such a popular thing and so many people were asking, I thought this might be perfect. But writing for orchestra, purely orchestra without the singers and musical lines, is a different challenge. It's one I kind of relish as a composer because you have to approach the music differently. It's got to convey the emotion, but without the words and the singers. So you have to rethink your orchestration. And you also, an opera is usually like 2.5, 3 hours. And I wanted something really self-contained here that would be succinct, to the point, and also very dramatic. So picking out the music and figuring out how to weave these things together into like a perfect little quilt of a drama was kind of an interesting challenge. So I had a lot of fun. It was amazing to revisit it and rethink the way I'd written, but also to figure out how to present that music to the orchestra and to the audience, because those are 2 really important components. Really, I can't write the music just by myself. It's got to actually be executed. But it's also kind of fun to share this story. Charles Fraser's Cold Mountain is it's a real winner.
That's super interesting to think about. I have a background in vocal performance. So thinking about like the themes within the characters, I'm excited to read your program notes or what you can share with us for program notes as we kind of try to listen for what you've pulled from the opera for the suite itself. So that's just a side note of something that I'm excited about.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's an interesting, I always wonder what this is like for someone who is trained in vocal music to see something like this get converted. It's not converted because you have to rewrite. You have to adjust, and you also have to create, in my instance, I had to create some new music to get it to work properly.
Very interesting. So obviously this commission is part of a consortium. Is this your first consortium commission? So that's question 1, I guess.
Yeah, no, I do tons of consortium commissions. This past week, I just had a world premiere with the Houston Symphony. It has 2 other orchestras involved. In fact, I think I've been in Indianapolis a couple of times with the symphony orchestra for co-commissioning projects. My violin concerto, which won the Pulitzer, was commissioned by the Indianapolis Symphony. So, and that was actually a co-commission too. So I think most of my stuff actually involves multiple organizations. It makes it easier for everyone. There's less financial burden on the institutions. You can also work to kind of adjust stuff in the music, and it kind of widens the publicity. But so there's also a little bit of cachet that goes when you're in with a whole bunch of other commissioners. There's something about that that's really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're really excited to be a part of this. I think this is one of our first forays into that, and to be kind of the Indiana premiere of the work and kind of sneak in, I guess, under the radar of the symphony orchestra is a good opportunity for us. So, we're honored to be a part of that. Obviously, I think the timeline for this has changed. Everything has changed in the past 2 years with performance. So talk to me about, I guess, what the original timeline was, maybe how COVID affected and changed that. When is the first premiere of the work? Those sorts of things.
Let's see. The first premiere of the work is in the fall of 22. Are we in 2022? I think we are.
I have that trouble with that too. This fall.
So the world premiere is this fall. I think it's in September of 24 with the Delaware Symphony. It's interesting. I can't remember what the original timeline. There was an original timeline that delivered earlier for this particular commission, but I often have my schedule. It has a lot of stuff on it. So during the lockdown portion, because Philly was locked down longer than most places, I think I did 11 works. I wrote 11 pieces, which is a lot of music. But I had to kind of shift around. The big thing is looking at when orchestras would restart. This was the thing. It was much harder. I mean, chamber groups they could do things. Choirs could not, opera could not. Orchestras, it was a little more of a challenge unless it was just strings. And so I kind of did a lot of calculations, talked to a lot of people who were organizing the schedule to try to figure out what would work optimally for everyone, because commissions, I think I had this and 3 other orchestra works during the lockdown, which these are pretty big things. They take a while to write, but you have to put them in the right order to make sure you're delivering material on time. It was an interesting time, but it also did mean that I had lots of time at home in solitude, really thinking about making the most of the music, making sure it had a powerful punch, which you don't always get that if you're traveling a lot. It's a lot harder to pull that off, but that long uninterrupted concentration, I thought, was just an amazing thing for a composer.
So in your process, have you heard this played by live musicians yet? Or is it just kind of files and in your mind's eye kind of thing?
Boy, that's a good question. I've heard portions of it through the opera performance, but not as it is because there were singers. So I have kind of an idea of what it will sound like. And in my head, it plays as an orchestra. I have to confess, I don't make MIDI files of the things I compose, which is a little unusual, but I think it's because when I was training, it was before the computer notation programs were really up and running well. So it lives in my head, basically. Soon to be, though, out into the open.
Very exciting. So with kind of a commission rollout like this over multiple states, do you intend to make edits and changes from September to when we hear the piece in January? What's been the process?
Yeah, you know what? I do usually make some changes after the premiere. Usually during the first week of rehearsals, I'm making lots and lots of notes in the score to figure out that everything works optimally. And that could be everything from a percussionist switching mallets or to sticks, or removing like a couple of measures in one instrument because maybe there's too much sound in a spot. I'm always trying to figure out how to make things as colorful as possible. So sometimes the way you do that is by subtracting what's already on the page, like a bright sound, because you want the bright sound to be more fresh sounding 3 minutes into the piece. So you remove all the bright sounds 2.5 minutes before you get the bright sound moment. So I'm always analyzing, and through the first rehearsal process, I normally, and sometimes the second even, I will literally make small changes because I want to make sure that the piece, when it comes to all the orchestras, works the best for the musicians. And so you kind of have to analyze, and I talk to the musicians in the orchestra and figure out, does this harp part work? Does this work? So it's important to get things to fit, to make all of the music work.
Great. So speaking of that conversation that you have with, musicians themselves, as you think about the commission process of when you were maybe a resident composer versus now as a consortium working with multiple orchestras, how's that changed maybe your relationship with individual organizations, thoughts kind of pertaining to that sort of aspect of composition?
That's a good question. I've done a lot of residencies, but I have to admit I haven't done any in the past several years, probably because of COVID. But it doesn't really change that much. It probably was a different experience when I was a younger composer, because sometimes being with an orchestra over a prolonged period of time, you might get to know the player so you can kind of shape the music. But now I've worked with so many orchestras that I pretty much understand the balances and how it all works in the instruments. And if I have a question, sometimes I'll just ask a musician. I've been known to go into the Philadelphia Orchestra and pop in after a rehearsal or an intermission and ask someone, can you do this on your instrument? But it's pretty much the idea in all cases is to write the very best music that you can. That's the whole goal. Whether you ever meet the musicians, know the musicians well, are in residence, or just doing a consortium, you want to make the best music that you can. I think it's a fascinating thing when you write music. And I often tell people you shouldn't have to have a PhD to come to a concert and enjoy it. Even if this is your very first orchestra concert, my job is to make sure that the music moves you, that it has an impact. And so when I'm composing, I think about that. That's what I consider responsibility as the person who creates the notes on the page. I realize that a patron, an audience member, even the orchestra, they're giving some of their time. They're trusting us to give them an experience that is emotional, or it really does kind of leave an impression. And so I think about that when I'm writing. It's kind of like my main objective, to make sure that the music I'm writing is communicative. And you don't have to know anything about classical music. You don't have to have any kind of background in it. And this could be your first concert. There's a little bluegrass in there. There's a lot of lyrical tunes, great drama. But it's also just kind of fun to hear it and to work with the musicians. So I'm very, very appreciative of Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra being a part of this consortium. It means a whole lot. So I have real gratitude for the support, and I'm thrilled to be able to share my music with you.